The morning sun hung low over the rolling hills of Willow Creek, North Carolina, casting a golden glow across the parking lot of Willow Creek High School. Marcus Ellison adjusted the collar of his Marine Corps dress blues, the fabric crisp against his skin, the metals pinned to his chest catching the light. He stepped out of his weathered Ford pickup, the same one he'd driven cross-country from Camp Pendleton to be here for his daughter, Amara's, high school graduation. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled, a reminder of the 20-hour drive he'd made in one go, fueled by coffee and the promise he'd made to his late wife, Lena. Marcus was a broad-shouldered man, his face etched with lines from years under the desert sun, his eyes carrying a quiet intensity that didn't invite questions. He'd seen combat in places most people only read about, but today, his mission was simpler: to sit in the front row and watch Amara, his only child, walk across the stage. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small, folded letter, Lena's last words to him, written before cancer took her 3 years ago. "Be there for her, Marcus. Always." He tucked it into his pocket, next to his heart, and started toward the school. The high school was a modest brick building, its flagpole adorned with the American flag and the North Carolina state flag flapping lazily in the breeze. Families were already streaming in, parents in sundresses and button-ups, kids clutching balloons, grandparents snapping photos. Marcus's boots clicked against the asphalt, each step deliberate, his posture a product of discipline that never left him. He wasn't here to stand out, but the uniform made that impossible. Heads turned as he passed, some with nods of respect, others with fleeting glances that lingered too long. Inside, the gymnasium was a sea of noise and color. Folding chairs lined the floor, creaking under the weight of proud families. A banner overhead read "Class of 2025" in bold blue letters. The air smelled of sweat, perfume, and anticipation. Marcus handed his ticket to a volunteer, a young woman with a clipboard who smiled nervously and pointed to a seat in the second row, reserved for families of honor students. Amara, with her straight-A record and quiet determination, had earned that distinction. "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice low but warm. He navigated the crowded aisle, ignoring the occasional stares. He was used to them, being a black man in a small town, in a uniform that screamed authority, always drew eyes. Some were curious, some wary, a few hostile. He'd learned to let them slide off him like rain on glass. He settled into his seat, the plastic chair groaning slightly under his frame, and scanned the rows of graduates at the far end of the gym. Amara was there, her cap tilted slightly, her gown too long at the hem, just like her mother's had been at her own graduation. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The ceremony began with the hum of pomp and circumstance, and the crowd stood, a wave of murmurs and applause rippling through the gym. Marcus rose too, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on Amara. The national anthem followed, and he stood at attention, not out of obligation but because it was part of who he was. The music faded, and the principal took the stage, her voice crackling through the microphone as she welcomed everyone. Marcus sat, his focus unwavering, the letter in his pocket a silent anchor. Then he noticed them, two security guards moving down the aisle, their steps clipped, their eyes locked on him. They wore black polos with Crestline security embroidered in yellow, their belts heavy with radios and flashlights. The shorter one, with a buzz cut and a scowl, led the way. The taller one, wiry and pale, followed, his face blank but his posture tense. Marcus didn't move, but his senses sharpened, the way they always did when something felt off. "Sir," the shorter guard said, stopping beside Marcus's chair, his voice low but sharp. "We need you to come with us." Marcus turned his head slowly, his expression calm. "Is there a problem?" The taller guard shifted his weight. "This section's for family only. We gotta report you're in the wrong seat." Marcus reached into his pocket and produced his ticket, holding it out without breaking eye contact. "Second row, family seating. My daughter's graduating. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The shorter guard, whose badge read Tanner, didn't glance at the ticket. "We were told this area's full. There's seats in the back." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "I drove 20 hours to be here. I'm not moving." A few heads turned nearby. A woman in a floral dress whispered to her husband, her eyes darting to Marcus. A teenager in the row behind angled his phone, the lens catching the light. Tanner leaned closer, his tone hardening.
Look, let's not make this a thing. Just come with us.
Marcus met his gaze, unflinching.
You're making it a thing. I'm staying.
The air grew heavy, the kind of tension that makes people hold their breath. Tanner's hand twitched toward his radio, and the taller guard, badge reading Ellis, muttered something under his breath.
Marcus didn't need to hear it to know what it was.
He'd heard it before, in different words, different places, but always the same undertone.
This wasn't about seats.
It was about him. The gym buzzed with the low hum of the ceremony, but the energy around Marcus had shifted. The principal's voice droned on, calling names, but the people nearby were watching the standoff, their attention split between the stage and the drama unfolding in the second row. Marcus sat like a stone, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes forward. He wasn't here for a fight, but he wasn't leaving either. Tanner's face reddened, his voice dropping to a hiss.
Sir, I'm asking you one last time. Move to the back, or we'll have to escort you out.
Marcus turned his head, his eyes locking onto Tanner's.
You don't have the authority to move me. Check the ticket.
Call your supervisor.
I'm not going anywhere.
Ellis shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the growing number of eyes on them. A man in a suit 2 rows over leaned forward, his brow furrowed. A grandmother with a program fanned herself, muttering to her neighbor. The tension was a living thing now, spreading like ripples in a pond. Tanner's radio crackled, and he pressed it to his ear, muttering something back. His expression hardened.
You're causing a disturbance. Let's go.
Marcus's voice was steady, almost soft.
The only disturbance here is you. My daughter's about to walk across that stage. I'm watching her. That's it.
The words landed like a gavel, and for a moment, Tanner hesitated.
But his pride wouldn't let him back down.
He stepped closer, his hand hovering near his belt, not quite touching the flashlight but close enough to make a point.
You think that uniform gives you special treatment? Marcus didn't flinch. This uniform means I've earned my place. Same as I earned this seat.
The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and a few people stood, craning their necks. Amara, standing with the graduates, caught sight of the scene. Her eyes widened, her hands clenching the edge of her gown. She whispered something to the girl beside her, who glanced over and froze. Then, from the back of the gym, a door opened, not loudly, but with enough purpose to draw eyes. A man stepped in, tall and lean, with close-cropped hair and a black jacket that didn't quite hide the strength in his frame. He didn't rush, didn't call attention, but his presence cut through the noise like a blade. He took a seat near the aisle, his eyes locked on Marcus and the guards.
Another man followed, then another, each entering quietly, taking positions around the gym.
They didn't wear uniforms, but their movements were too precise, their gazes too sharp. Marcus didn't turn to look, but he knew who they were. He'd led them through hell in Fallujah, pulled them from burning vehicles, shared rations under starless skies. They were his brothers, not by blood but by something deeper. Tanner noticed the new arrivals, his eyes darting to the man in the black jacket, Leon Carter, a former SEAL who'd once carried Marcus across a riverbed under sniper fire.
Tanner's confidence wavered, but he pressed on. You're making this harder than it needs to be.
Marcus's voice was a low rumble.
Walk away. Now.
Ellis tugged at Tanner's sleeve, his voice urgent.
Man, let's just go. This isn't worth it. But Tanner wasn't listening.
He leaned in, his voice dripping with venom.
You don't belong here. Take your show somewhere else.
The words hit like a slap, and the gym went quiet, not completely, but enough that the principal's voice faltered mid-sentence. Amara's eyes burned with tears, but she stood taller, her chin lifting. Marcus didn't move, but something in his posture shifted, a quiet strength that filled the space around him. Leon stood, his voice cutting through the silence.
You're done here.
It wasn't loud, but it carried, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command. Tanner spun around, startled.
Who the hell are you? Leon stepped into the aisle, his eyes never leaving Tanner's. Someone who knows what loyalty looks like. Back off.
The gym was a pressure cooker now, every eye on the unfolding scene. The principal gestured frantically to an assistant, who scurried toward a side door, likely calling for backup. But the 6 men, Leon Carter, Javier Ruiz, Ethan Blake, Caleb Morse, Owen Tate, and Malik Ford, didn't need to speak. Their presence was enough. They stood scattered across the gym, not in formation but with a unity that spoke louder than words. Tanner's hand twitched toward his radio again, but Leon's voice stopped him cold. "Don't. You're out of your depth." Ellis, visibly shaken, took a step back. "Tanner, come on, man. Let's go." But Tanner's ego was a stubborn thing. He squared his shoulders, glaring at Marcus. "You think you can just sit there and make a scene? This is a school, not a battlefield." Marcus's eyes met his, unyielding. "I'm not the one making a scene. You are." The crowd was fully invested now, some filming, others whispering. A woman in a red blouse stood, her voice sharp. "Leave him alone. He's here for his daughter." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Tanner's face flushed deeper. Javier Ruiz, positioned near the bleachers, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. "You've got 2 choices. Walk away, or we make this a problem you can't handle." Tanner's eyes darted between the men, realization dawning. These weren't random spectators. They moved like soldiers, their silence more threatening than any shout. Malik Ford, standing near the back, crossed his arms, his gaze like a laser. Caleb Morse leaned against a wall, his casual stance belying the tension in his shoulders. The principal finally reached the aisle, her face pale. "Gentlemen, please, let's resolve this quietly." Leon turned to her, his tone respectful but unwavering. "Ma'am, this man's here to see his daughter graduate. These 2 are the ones causing trouble." Tanner opened his mouth to argue, but the principal cut him off. "Enough. Return to your posts. Now." Tanner hesitated, his pride warring with the weight of the moment. Finally, Ellis grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. The crowd watched them go, a mix of relief and awe settling over the gym. Marcus remained seated, his eyes returning to the stage, where Amara stood, tears streaming down her face but her head held high. Leon sat down, followed by the others, their presence still a quiet force. The ceremony resumed, but the air had changed. It wasn't just about diplomas anymore, it was about respect, earned through sacrifice and defended by loyalty. As the principal called Amara's name, Marcus leaned forward, his heart swelling. She crossed the stage, her steps steady despite the emotion in her eyes. She accepted her diploma, shaking the principal's hand, then turned to the crowd, searching until she found her father. Marcus raised a hand, a small gesture, but it carried everything: pride, love, the weight of a promise kept. The crowd erupted in applause, louder than for any other graduate, a collective release of the tension that had gripped the room. Amara smiled, a tear escaping, and Marcus felt Lena's letter against his chest, a reminder of why he was here. After the ceremony, families spilled onto the lawn, taking photos and laughing. Marcus stood near the flagpole, Amara at his side, her cap now in her hands. "You didn't have to do that, Dad," she said, her voice soft. "Didn't have a choice," Marcus replied, his eyes warm. "You're my world." Leon and the others approached, their faces relaxed now, smiles breaking through. "Didn't think we'd miss this, did you?" Leon said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. Marcus shook his head, a rare grin spreading. "Should have known you'd show up." Amara hugged each of them, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you. All of you." The 6 SEALs, men who'd faced death with Marcus, who'd carried each other through the worst of times, stood together, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. They didn't need words to know what this moment meant. It wasn't just about a graduation. It was about standing up, standing together, and proving that some things, family, loyalty, respect, were worth fighting for. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the men who'd had his back. He didn't say it, but he felt it. Lena was watching, and she was proud.